What is up, everybody? This is Chad here with one of my boys, Dr.OfStuff, one of the most intelligent guys in the community. He actually helps run the Crypto Rain YouTube channel, and I was lucky enough to be featured on there with D Money. So yeah, thrilled to have him in here today. We're gonna have a very granular conversation. I think we're gonna get into the weeds on a few issues. So if you're into that kind of stuff, definitely stick around. So thank you so much for joining, my man. And I guess the question of the hour is Disney acquiring VeVe?
Well, first of all, I am stoked and honored to be on your channel. I mean, we were stoked to have you on the Crypto Rain channel, right? When I was talking with Crypto Rain about people that we want to start getting on the channel, like you're just one of the top names. So I am honored to be here. And yeah, we'll jump right in with. Is Disney going to acquire VeVe? I'll say two things, right? We see Reverend Alex G, who I admire. I really like that guy, and he seems to kind of, anytime someone throws that out, his responses are kind of like, no, right? I mean, in a roundabout way, he's kind of saying like, no, that's not. But does he know, or would he know? Like, I know this, right? When I've dealt with companies. There are times that only the top people know of acquisitions, like the top, right? Now I know that Alex is up there, but like I don't know, right? So there is there is that potential, and why is there that potential, right? There's a lot of reasons that it could make sense for Disney to bring VeVe into the fold, and they're known for acquiring companies that are doing well, right? And they're successful at doing that. When they acquired Marvel, Pixar, and like look at what these brands have become, right? So VeVe is this rising star, and they decide to do their first NFTs with VeVe,
right?
And you saw, I don't know if you saw the interview, right, with that ex-Disney executive who was kind of just like, why would you do these NFTs with VeVe? Like, why wouldn't you go out on your own and do like a Christie's drop or something like that of a Mickey? And VeVe is powerful in this space, and they've been here for quite some time, and they're the front runner in all of this. And so, would it make sense for Disney to acquire VeVe? I think it could absolutely make sense. So we'll start there. What are your thoughts?
Amazing. I just want to echo those sentiments. Like, thrilled to have you on the show too, dude. And I know I was like fired up, just jumped right into Disney. But obviously there's so many questions I want to ask you. So I echo, exactly what you're saying here. One of the biggest things that I think about, just from a simplistic perspective, is like, if Disney's going to come out with their metaverse, would it almost be embarrassing to say that they don't have their own best NFTs? Like, what are they going to be like? We have this 2nd edition Woody for you and the 4th edition partners. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I'm like, it's much easier for them just to go, okay, let's just acquire them and then just drop it into our bigger metaverse plans. So I think it's very plausible. And I always wonder, like, why, why is it kind of things are stagnating a little bit? Why is things a little slower than usual? Why haven't this team scaled up to greater heights? I mean, you look at new projects like Recur and stuff like that, and it's still a pretty small team overall, right? Like that VeVe has compared to them. And these are new things coming up. I was looking at Recur, there's like 80 something job opportunities. And I was like, I would presume VeVe would have over 100 at this point,
That's a great point. I know that, and certain companies will do this, right, where they do a lot of the outsourcing for certain things. So although I do understand to a certain extent VeVe's roadmap, right, we do know that the VeVe-verse is coming. You would expect that at some point, especially with all the success they've had, that they would start bringing some. Now, I do remember in the AMA that Alex did talk about them putting out, like, hiring more people to be on the team, right? But it is a little slow. And so could that be speculatively, like, would there be a reason for that if they are in talks and stuff? It's like, well, why are we going to scale when really Disney's going to acquire us and we're going to get all of this additional support staff to help us, right? And one thing that's been interesting, because look, this question has been posed to David and Dan in the AMAs, right? What happens if you get acquired? And they basically were like, hey, this is a passion project. Like, it doesn't make sense. We went without getting paid for 3 years, right? So we're obviously okay enough with that, like that this was just our baby, that, you know, we don't want someone to just come in and change that. But what if Disney comes in and says, hey, you're still in place, but now we're going to offer you all of the Disney resources, right? And we're going to help you grow like that. Would that make sense to say, well, we still want to keep you on as the CEO and COO of this company, but now you have all of these additional resources and everything at your fingertips. Is that not enticing potentially? Right? Like, and then also everyone has a price. Everyone has a price at some point where it's just like they dingle that golden carrot, and it's just like at some point you're like, it's, I mean, sorry, like I'm grabbing it. Like,
you're right.
So yeah.
You're right, my man. It's because it's like, you know, at the end of the day, Bora Bora sounds nice. Like all these different things. It's like, you know, I like, I'm sure that, like you said, it's they're passionate about it and everything, but there's just like little subtle signs sometimes. Like I remember when Marvel Comics, that 1000 mint ASM 252 was dropped, Alex had some reservations, and he's like, I didn't want, I don't know what he said exactly, so I don't want to speak for him, but he essentially said like he kind of disagreed, or he thought it should have been a higher mint run. And then again, like with Disney Golden Moments, a lot of people thought it was going to be the only time it was dropping. And here we are now on a third drop. And I think people are kind of like, well, is VeVe deciding this, or is Disney pushing this? And if Disney is pushing this, then does that mean Disney has more control? Which then begs the question, are they again acquiring VeVe, right? So there's all these things happening in people's minds. But what's your take on, you know, the golden moments, I guess, with this new drop? Like, do you think potentially this could devalue golden moments as a whole a little bit, or is it just part of the process? Like we always expected to get more Disney stuff here.
I do think it devalues. Look, when Alex, when these first were dropped, and look, I don't want to take anything away from Alex, or like, this isn't throwing shade. He said what he knew at the time. He stated that there wouldn't be more golden moments after that drop. And that was his belief, right? And so then the Valentine's drop with Daisy and Donald and Lady and the Tramp, people were like, what the heck, man? Like you said there weren't going to be any, and he was like, that's what I was told. And then Disney came to us and they're like, hey, we'd like to do this, and so we were like, okay. And so you do bring up a good point, right? At what point does VeVe draw the line and say, well, hey, this doesn't really make sense? And does Disney have just kind of the oomph to say, well, it makes sense for us, so do it?
Yeah.
And you know, and is that because they're acquiring them, or just because they want to appease Disney? And so that's concerning, right? Anytime that you have a partner that becomes so big that they kind of dictate like your roadmap going forward, could be a concern, right? But so does it devalue it? Yeah, we've already seen it. We've already seen drops in some of the golden moments, and I've seen a lot of posts of people being like, man, I really threw a ton of money into these golden moments, the original golden moments, thinking that like this was all there was going to be. Right. That being said, if you'd done research, and I was kind of surprised because I was like, well, you know, these golden moments kind of come from I can't remember exactly what they call it. It's not golden moments, but there's these 50 statues basically, right, around the parks. And I don't remember what they call them. It's not golden moments, but so I was like, well, that's weird that they're only doing like some of them and not all of them, because for the 3D modeling, it's a lot easier if they already have those models and statues to kind of pop those out a lot quicker than creating a 3D model from scratch. Right. So yeah, like in the back of my mind, like I was like, well, these are still going to be the first Disney kind of releases, right, during that week and things. So I think these will still maintain more value. But I'm like, if they do drop more down the line, these will drop in value. And that's something that you have to take into consideration when you're throwing money at these things, is like, what could happen? You have to throw out scenarios. Yeah. So it's something to think about.
Great points, my man. And I think that's the problem that a lot of people, don't realize, is like, we keep talking about that you and I at the point of saturation, how, the more and more things that come into the app, like, things that aren't Grail like, so to speak, quote unquote, have a harder time, standing, for a longer period at a higher price point. And, somebody told me the other day, oh, I can't wait till my Elsa hits 100,000. I'm like, you do realize if it does, that's like a $1.2 billion market cap.
Yeah.
just on Elsa, right? And it's like, think about, maybe if there's 100 NFTs just as valuable, are we presuming it's $100 billion already, when, I think VeVe as a whole is like, maybe, I don't know, a $2 billion evaluation on the NFTs. So I think these are questions that, people don't really, they're not understanding yet. And so I think it's just important to be realistic as well. But I wanted to shift gears a little bit with you, because, some of the most interesting questions right now are all about this, the minting data and sequential mints and blockchain and all that stuff. And, I was hoping we can get a little more granular. And I think my first question for you here is, if NFTs aren't minted sequentially, how could this affect their value long term? So as an example, if you had the number, 57 Todd, but really it was like the 3,200, let's just say, on the blockchain, what do you think that really would affect value long term? Or do you think a lot of people don't really care about the blockchain stuff and are just like focused on what the mint number is on VeVe?
That is such an awesome question, Chad. And
Thanks,
and I think it's important to try to work through this in our minds, because I think if we can come up with what we believe, then we need to be making decisions about that going forward in our buying strategies, right? Because here's the deal. When I got onto VeVe, which I've been so busy. My VeVe birthday was the 12th of this month, and I didn't even get a post about it or anything. But it's been awesome. It's been a wild ride. But
wow.
Like when I got on there, right, and when I was talking to Crypto Rain, the first thing he said to me was like, out of all of these things, this Todd is the first minted, right? This is the one that was first created on the blockchain. And I said, that holds significance. That right there does, and it will forever hold significance. Like. And it was minted on GoChain in sequential order, right? So you do have these mint numbers, and that mattered. And then we found out, kind of as they did this switch over to Immutable X, that Immutable X, like, I think they have some sort of like synchronous minting where like it's not in sequential order. And we're seeing that in the data on Immutable X, right? Because I got two different collectibles, and I have like a lower mint number and a higher mint number. Then I go on to Immutascan and I look, right, and the higher mint number has a lower number on the blockchain. And so then here are my thoughts on it. We do know that the lower mints, as VeVe numbers, then will have more utility, or they will earn more points. So there is value in that for people who are trying to get the Master Collector program. Right. But I do think that as you go out 15 to 20 years, I do think that the ones that were minted first, that matters to people, and they will look at that. And I don't know if necessarily the mint numbers will matter first, but like, here's the cool thing is that the Todds and some of like the season 1s and season 2s, those were minted in sequential order. And I feel like people can look at that and say, yes, then it moved over to Ethereum, right, via Immutable X layer 2 solution. But like on the blockchain, they were minted on GoChain, like in sequential order. And so I do think that people will look at those differently than they look like once the switch was over, and be like, maybe like the mint numbers will matter for like master collectors, but like, am I attributing the mint number with the value because it's lower, because I know now that it's not necessarily lower on the blockchain. So that's my opinion. I do think that going forward, like the first, 2 seasons before the Immutable X switch, people will look at those mint numbers differently, even though they do have a different mint number on Ethereum. People can always go back and say, no, historically, these were minted in this order originally.
Man, I think you explained that better than anybody I know. I feel like for me, it was a really confusing concept to break down, because I was like, okay, it's on GoChain first, it's minted sequentially, then it's reminted in a different order, but it still keeps that heritage of GoChain. And it's only, like you said, those collectibles that were on GoChain before they got transitioned to IMX that would still hold true potentially to, I guess, that GoChain mint data. So I mean, it's just a little confusing because I was like, I also don't know in the metadata on GoChain how much of the story was told. So so I think it's a really interesting debate, and like you said, and in 15 years from now or something, it might be really fun trivia for like blockchain purists or something. But I was also thinking if VeVe also introduced like tiered accessories or something to that effect, like where like a sub 100 got you something different, like I don't know, like a cape or like a crown or something to that effect. So that would incentivize it even more. But I do agree on your analysis. Like I feel like it will be have more interest for those earlier items. So I think that's great points. So on that note, I'm sure you saw some of the stuff happening with comics and crypto. It's been a huge topic right now between the Comic Way and them, and I think even Cavell did a bit of a video on it. And so I just wanted to, I guess, get your take on this slab system, and I guess like how you view it. And I think we'll both have some different opinions on it, but I think that's great. And it seems there's a varied amount of opinions, but I think one thing I for sure know is I know Sean at Comics and Crypto very well, and he's a great cat. And I know like the intention was extremely pure and just there to help the community and make a fun way of kind of making some comparisons to the real world in terms of that grading system. But I know there's some reservations, so we can get into that.
Yeah, so I talked about this a little bit too on our last video, but so it was interesting listening to spaces and people's arguments and things. And from my standpoint, so first of all, props to comics and crypto, right, for putting themselves out there to do that, right? I mean, this is a question people have been asking this question for some time, right? Like, because these don't deteriorate, like, really is the only way to grade them the mint number, or or are there other ways? And so I think that they looked at that and just said, hey, well, we're gonna take how we grade physicals and kind of apply that grading system to these NFTs. And like, so I appreciate the thought, but from my standpoint, that grading system is tied to deterioration, right?
Mm.
And that just does not happen in NFTs. Like, they will forever be perfect, right? And one of the things that they talked about, the VeVe team, was like, do we make these as they're opened and used more? Do they deteriorate? Do we try to mimic what happens in the real world? Then I think that grading system would apply.
Mm.
Could apply more. But just to take like the mint number, that like there's so much that comes into play. There's so many other variables that doesn't really consider, that I don't think it's a really accurate way for someone to make a financial decision off of and say, okay, well, this mint number of 500 common is within the like top 0.5% of mint numbers, and that's gonna like, so this is worth more than the secret rare, the 60,000 mint, let's do the Marvel one, right? The Marvel one, and say like the secret rare Marvel one, mint number 59,000.
Mm-hmm.
And for me personally, when I'm looking at scarcity, I'm gonna say, well, like the secret rare, that cover itself, it is more rare in general. But the problem is people start to stratify this, like in slice and dice it in so many different ways. Well, if I look at like sub 1,000 mints, right? Well, then is this more rare than the of the commons? Is this more rare than the secret rares, or and look, I think that time will tell, but the market right now is saying they value the secret rares, doesn't matter the mint, way more valuable than a low mint common.
Mm-hmm.
And so giving that 9.8 grade to like a low mint common at 500, and then like a really like low grade, like a 1.8 to like a 59,000 mint secret rare doesn't make sense to me. So
Right.
those are my thoughts on it, but I'd love to hear kind of your take.
Yeah, I think those are some great points that you make. And I think the biggest misconception is that I think a lot of people are presuming that because it's a physical grading system in the real world that is attached to value, that what they're trying to do is take that same kind of value perspective and apply it to the NFT space. And I think that's what they're not trying to do. And that's what, at least like I've heard from comics and crypto, was saying, no, that's not what we're trying to say. We're just trying to basically make some different categories. And a lot of times, we still don't have the sales data yet, but I think they were trying to say like, well, there's fewer people that would want potentially like a higher mint. You'd always, and there seems to be some pretty strong subjective or objective, I guess in the community, more objective, of people liking low mints. So there are some people that will go after those low mints. And I think that's where they're trying to associate a higher grade. But I think the person that I think explained it really well was Granola Wayfair, or is that right? Am I saying that? Way back in the day on Reddit. Granola Warfare. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah.
So he said on Reddit way back in the day, from the trends he was noticing was that, a high mint kind of sells like, so let's just like take Secret Marvel, or the Marvel comic #1 Secret Rare. He said a high mint, let's say 59,500, sells at a bit of a discount from the floor, not by much. And then he's like, from 59,000 all the way to, let's just say like maybe 15,000, it's kind of just a really slow, gradual curve. And then, and again, I'm not like, he can speak on this. I don't want to say this is exactly what he said, but this was my interpretation from his post. And then as it gets up into the sub 100s, sub 200s, more of the sub 100s, it's more of like, it goes up pretty fast, right? And it kind of reminds me of Pokemon cards, like in grading. Like if you look at like a 9.0 for a Charizard Secret Rare Shadowless, it was like maybe 35 grand, but then a 10 can go all the way up to like 360,000. And it's like, okay, but then if you look at the 5s and stuff, it's pretty low. But again, that's all based off of physical deterioration. So I think there are some parallels, but like you said, I don't think it's an exact science. And I think the biggest thing is like, people that have like a high mint Secret Rare are probably going, damn, like I don't want this system to get applied, because I think this is a very valuable comic, and I don't want people to think that it's not valuable because the system gets adopted and somebody's making comparison that it's a 0.5 grade, so therefore I won't buy it. So I think a lot of people got, potentially threatened by that, but I think it was misconstrued about how the community took it and what was portrayed. I think they had, no more than great intentions. And
100%.
Yeah. So I think that most people are kind of on the same line as us in terms of like what they think. So with that, unless you have any further comments on that, my man.
No, I think you brought it up, like, and again, I do think that comics and crypto was well-intentioned, and it kind of like, man, it stinks sometimes when you see people kind of being like attacked or something when they're trying to just like add value in the way that they think will help. So mad props, like I said, to comics and crypto for putting that out there and trying, because we're in such a new space just in general, right? Like you look at Bored Ape Yacht Club, and like, so they've got 10,000 mints, but no one looks at the mint number, right? They look at rarity traits, right? Well, the rarity trait that we have is the mint number. Right. And then different type, like common, uncommon, like those are some of the rarity traits and things. So it'll be interesting, but ultimately I think over time the market will kind of decide for us. And so just a general group think of like, hey, this is what we think we're going to attribute more value to this going forward. But at some point, I think people coming up with these ideas, they will get honed over time too, to help people that come into the space.
And that's, I think you said that so well, because that's the one thing, like when you put your neck out, especially as an influencer, it's difficult sometimes, because, every video I put out, there's at least, 4 or 5 people with some negative comments or some dislikes. And that's just part of the game. But I think, what people don't realize is that like every time you put something out, especially if you're taking a leap forward, and I think they're they're pioneering the space. I mean, who knows, this could go down in history as the first people to try to, grade NFTs as that's pretty historical. Right? That's cool. Right. Absolutely. And it's like, that's a thing that we need to support. And like you said, as a community, like how do we ensure that all of our concerns are met? And they were very transparent, saying that they're more than happy to have frequent conversations, to take more people's perspectives, and they even said this is like, a first draft, like this is like a work in progress, and it's free. So anyways, I think there's a lot of good stuff that we mentioned there. And that also begs the question though, and this is what I wanted to talk to you about, is how many parallels can we draw to the physical world, right? Like I'm always saying, oh, this Pokemon card is worth X, and therefore, these NFTs could follow similar collecting principles, but things could be completely abstract. Like I've said this before, people can come on the platform, and Logan Paul or something's like Labracorn to the moon, and then everything we said about collecting goes haywire. So where do we draw a cap? Because there's utility, there's gamification, there's all these other things that NFTs have that, a lot of physicals don't. So I guess, are we making some decent analysis for people, or are we kind of, being outlandish and maybe overreaching with expertise, so to speak?
I think there are so many people that reach out to me and they're like, hey, what do you think about this? Right. There are people that, look, I take the time and I try to do as much research as possible. Right. And so people will come out and they'll say, I haven't had the time. Like, what are your thoughts on this? Here's what I'm thinking, but like, I would like some additional input. Right. And so I think that people in the space, one of the things that drew me to you and your channel, Pirates, was basically your expertise in comics. And then when you started talking about these mint numbers and things, because I wasn't familiar with that space. So I do think that it's important. And this is always going to happen. People will come up with systems to attribute value to things, right? Like we need that. We say, why is this better or more expensive, or is it the same price when I'm going to buy that, right? Because someone might have two of the same item and one wants to sell it for more. Well, why is this better? And so that's going to happen. But because this is such a new space, there's a lot of things that still haven't happened yet that we don't know that could totally change the game. Like you said, utility. What if they come out and they say, oh, well, hey, all of the uncommons get X, right? And the commons don't. And then all of a sudden the uncommons are better than the rares, or like, I mean, we don't know, right? So there's so much utility that can be added to these NFTs that it's tough to say. Like, look, I've heard you talk about it, and I've talked about it too, and I have been basically booed off Twitter Spaces stages before for saying that like Disney could add utility to like the Walt and the partner statue or the golden moments, and they're like, no, like that can't happen. And I'm just like, again, my thought process is I try to play out all different types of scenarios. Would this make sense, right? And if it does, well, then maybe I'm going to add a little bit more to my stack of these certain things because of the potential for that. If it doesn't, so be it, right? So I guess coming back to the question is, it's essential that people start, because it's so new, all we have to go off of is what the physical space is. And so we're going to start attributing those values. And then over time, that might morph as the NFT space matures and there is utility added in, or there's the community behind it that adds stuff to that, to then we start to learn from there. But we need a starting point, man. And so again, props to Comics and Crypto for doing that, because it's the start, and it will, again, like adapt and change over time. But it's essential that like we have a base, and that's what we're using is the physical world right now.
Beautiful. And I think that's, those are all great points. And I think, that's the part that's difficult for me, is I'm like, okay, well, this, what I've learned is like, I'm trying to take this knowledge and apply it somewhat to the NFTs. But like you said, there's still so much unknowns about NFTs, and we're still so early in this space that there's so much added things and principles that are yet to come to fruition. So for me to make an accurate analysis now, but what I am saying is that I might be able to make more of an accurate analysis because of the physical stuff that I know. And therefore, and like you said, it's helped both of us in terms of what we know in the real world and how it applies to NFTs, right? So, I mean, I think it's really interesting, and it's definitely like an important conversation to keep having. And my next question for you is, I've recently actually had the opportunity to talk with a lot of different gaming experts from Zynga, which is the number one, I think, mobile-led, gaming platform in the entire world. And they are recently acquired by Take-Two Interactive, which is the owners of GTA 5 and like NBA 2K and all this crap, right?
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I did not know that they had that. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so there was an article that came out maybe a few months ago with Matt Wolf, who's like, huge in the NFT space. And it looks like they're like, going to be launching something. I don't know when, but it's going to be, some kind of NFT game. And I'm like, wow, this is going to come from like the best, most trustworthy people in the world. But the most interesting thing that he said to me briefly was just that, that it looks as though there's a lot of like negative perception from the community on NFTs, from the gaming community at large. And but I personally believe that one day you will just have an NFT in your video game and it'll be interoperable and you own it. I don't know if it'll be like Spider-Man, but you would own these NFTs and play with them. And I guess like my question to you on this is like, do you think that one day that would be mainstream? Or do you think maybe NFTs are in a bit of a bubble right now and, extremely overpriced or overhyped? Like, where do you think the future of gaming and NFTs goes?
It has to happen. And I say that, like, it was interesting. I just had a conversation. I used to be a major gamer, right? I used to play Halo a lot, and I would go to competitions and things, and play. And I was really into it for quite some time. So some of my buddies are too, and they're still big gamers. And so they're not in the crypto space at all, and or NFTs or anything like that. So for the first time, I brought up kind of the possibility of, um, you know, uh, okay, well, what if your skins like were NFTs and you could sell them? And they couldn't understand almost. It was fascinating to me because I've been around NFTs for so long. But I remember when Crypto Rain was like, hey, this Todd Batman, it's an NFT, and I was like, man, it's like a picture, like I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
And so you have the fact that like it's still an unknown, like relatively like unfamiliar technology, and also the fact that there's a lot of misinformation out there about the energy costs surrounding NFTs and the minting of NFTs and things like that, right? So there is a lot of negative perception, and people in general don't like change. They like what they're comfortable with.
Right.
But we have massive companies that have major social influence, like Facebook/Meta, right? And like they're basically saying, hey, NFTs are coming to Instagram. So it's going to be a general slower adoption, but down the line, it's coming, whether they not like it or not. And this is why, is because you're going to get more and more gamers who are like, well, wait a second, why would I play this game, which is a fun game, when I could play this game and literally earn money as I play?
Right.
I mean, like, and that's the point. And when I posed it that way, and I said, okay, let's say that you have two similar games. One game you can play, and you have to pay for the skins and everything like that. And like as soon as you stop playing, that's lost trap value. Or you have another game that you can play and you still buy those skins. But then if you're done playing the game, you don't want to play anymore, you can sell and make money. And sometimes maybe a lot of money from some of the things you collected. And they're like, well, obviously I would do that one. I'm like, right. Obviously you would. And that's where it's going to go. So right now it's still unknown or unfamiliar. And so people are kind of just like, nah, like they don't want to accept that. But just as they hear about it more and get more familiar with just the concept, like it's going to happen. Like it will happen. Like that's my prediction. I would bet anything on the fact that down the line, all games will have NFTs.
Wow. That's such a cool thing. And it's interesting because even though there's a large negative perception now, it might like inverse and eventually be like a large positive, because like you said, you would actually be rewarded for your time at that point and even make money. And I'm like, I think about the amount of people that spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars on games, like Elden Ring or Skyrim or whatever, just to like level up their characters. I mean, I don't know if those are the right games that people spend that kind of money, but I am aware that people spend big money on this stuff. And it's like, well, geez, imagine now if you can immortalize, at least some of this cost and can transfer these characters into other places, games, metaverses, or what have you. So, I mean, it's very positive. And I guess that begs the next question when we talk about interoperability, this is one of the biggest, I think, deterrents that people have when they think about VeVe, is like they think about how difficult it is to obtain some of these licenses, and then what you can do with those licenses. So for instance, if you were to take, a partner statue into a cold wallet, or, put it into another metaverse like Sandbox, or like, extract it and play a game with it. Like, I mean, there's obviously going to be so much red tape on, the like putting these products into new markets and new places. And I think that's why, could this potentially not be, I guess, true ownership in a sense, because if it's just living on one platform forever, then how is that different than a game despite it being minted on the blockchain? Is kind of where I think people have some reservations. And I know we're getting some tough questions today. So I appreciate you kind of just, humoring me, and you're a smart dude. So I felt like, it would be like I said, we're going to get granular. So thanks for putting up with me on all this stuff.
No, I love the questions, and I think like these are the types of, the funny thing is like these are the types of questions that get brought up in spaces, or just like as I'm talking to other VeVe like that I surround myself with, like some of my brothers are really heavily into VeVe, right? We have these same questions. I do think the walled garden, to a certain extent, it does damage the value of it, because okay, so one of the big things that I saw, this super flex, right, is you walk into this office building and here they have a digital frame of their crypto punk, right? That's from their wallet showing on this digital frame. That is a massive flex, right? You can't do that like with VeVe, right? You can take a picture of it, but it's different. It's not from your wallet projecting onto that. And you can be like, oh, like I own that. And so like there is that true ownership thing, and that's part of like why decentralization, right, like was why Bitcoin was created, and a lot of DeFi, decentralized finance, like all of these things is kind of like giving the power back to the people. So there are going to be a lot of people, and like I follow a lot of the big NFT people. I I had conversations. This was back like when Bored Ape Yacht Club was happening, just getting off the ground and stuff, and like talked with a lot of people who ended up buying it. I have a whole story about how I didn't buy Bored Apes and I could have, but
Oh, wow.
they talk about this. This is what they talk about, like as people are like, oh yeah, well once like once we move to mutable X and we can sell some of these things, prices will skyrocket. And I do think about that there's that potential, right? One of the major holders of Bored Apes, I think he holds like 16 apes, and he was like, I would trade, when he heard about the first Mickey NFT, he was like, I would trade a Bored Ape for one of the like first Mickey NFTs, and people were tripping out,
Wow.
They're like, why would you do that? And he's like, this is Mickey Mouse, right? But then he found out that really like he couldn't bring it into cold storage's wallet, and he's like I'm out.
Right.
That speaks volumes right now to a lot of the crypto space and those people who feel that way. But my thought is this: you have these major IPs that this is a very, again, nascent space, and they're kind of still feeling it all out. I think that once they understand that, like, okay, moving it to my cold storage wallet, it's not going to harm you guys in any way. You're not allowing me to do derivatives. I don't necessarily own the IP to do this, that they will open that up, but it's going to take some time. But if they decide not to, right, the only way that value can increase is if VeVe and the VeVeverse add so much utility that people are okay just going into VeVe and holding it in VeVe, because that's where all of the utility with the NFT is. But it still will always, people will always be able to say, but I can't truly own it. I can't take it and put it away in my cold storage wallet. And that's a legit argument.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's so fascinating. And I think that's extremely bullish news that you said, like, a guy was willing to literally, get some Mickey NFTs, and he was that close to going through with it, if it weren't for just that one aspect. And so the interesting thing about centralization is that I feel like there still could be some potential for cold wallets, but it would be like a cold wallet that is like centralized in a sense. Like it would be attached maybe to a few different platforms like the Disney Metaverse, VeVe, and you could still put it like, in a cold wallet. Like, I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'm still trying to keep optimistic because I'm like, who knows, man? Like maybe there is still some potential. Maybe there'd be some different metaverses that, can all be interoperable with each other. And it would be like big blue chip companies moving in and out of only like maybe two or three. And then a decentralized kind of universe where there's like hundreds of different metaverses and wallets. So I'm like, there's still like almost like a blue chip kind of universe happening. And that's what I think what I'm still bullish on. But I do agree that I think that is a hesitation, like what you just said about the digital frame. I mean, that's so cool. I would love to be in an office and be like, here's Secret Rare Spider-Man, like, you know what I mean? Like, check that out. Like, and I want to get like a frame in the background of my Spider-Man, like a picture of it. But I was like, I want to make it cool. Like I don't want it to just be like this ugly, you know, JPEG. Like I want it to look like sweet. So I'm like, maybe we're still, you know, too early, man. But I guess that, you know, leads to my next question with like, you know, the master collector program. So right now, obviously one of the things I mentioned in my earlier video last week was with the master collector program, there's a lot of different things where I feel like it could potentially deter new users because whales and people with a lot of collectibles are going to have a higher allocation on drops, even if it's not by that much. But if you're already seeing such scarce collectibles, like it's possible that the ecosystem doesn't continue to develop because there's something to be said about how many NFTs somebody could get. And if you're not getting NFTs ever, you know, when there's 10 million people and there's a 10,000 mint drop, like, you know, I just don't see people coming into the app. And I feel like by introducing a master collector program too early, or if it's not given enough thought, it would just really appease the people that are already winning. And then the new people, even if they're getting some points for social activity, I just don't see them having enough of an incentive to stick around. And I think that's a really tough question because I think a lot of people are like, oh, we need that master collector program and whales want it, but it's like I don't think people understand that, you know, like getting all those people from the ground up and people that are new to it is very fragile space and a very important space. So they need to like really have something to grab onto. And you and I, because we were here early, had so much leverage, and that's why I think we're so obsessed with it. If we came later, bro, I'm telling you, I wouldn't really be involved in this. Like if I got a C3PO at $5,000, watch my investment go down to 2,500, I'd be like, damn, like, you know, I'll get the odd drop if I can, but I've been rambling on. So what's your take on that, my man?
No, dude, first of all, you are never rambling on. Let's just point that out, man. I love your insight and your thought process. But I'll say this, like you bring up a solid point that if they roll it out wrong, and look, we have master collector program version. It's the second version that we have out now, right? They came out with one and they got feedback. I think that they can still adapt it over time, and they would if there was a lot of uproar about things. So I do think that they're taking it very seriously and trying super hard, and that's why we don't have it yet, right? They're still, you know, tweaking things and making sure that it makes sense. But here's my thought process. Although it can help whales, right? To a certain extent, it can. Yes, whales will get more points, but at the same time, they're only allocating a certain amount of a drop to the lottery system, right? So yeah, you can throw your points into that lottery system and potentially win that, but then other than that, you're just like entered into the normal drop queue, just like everyone else, right? So now you might be able to use those master collector points for other things, maybe for capes or other utilities and stuff. But when you're talking about like actual drops, like there is a limit to the power that they have. And again, so if they land that drop, and let's say it's a Darth Vader, right? Or a Boba Fett or something like, and everyone's like, "Dang, I want that, right? So I'm gonna throw a ton of my points at that. And I get it. Like I just burned all of those points, right? Like, so then it's going to take me a while to catch back up, or maybe it's 25% of the points that you throw in, right? Like, but there is that burn there. And so, yes, the whales do earn more per day. And so they can throw more at that. But, like, number one, like, it still doesn't guarantee that they get it. And then number two, like, they will experience bigger burns if they do get it. Because they'll probably be throwing more at that, right? So like, so there's that aspect of it. But I agree with you. But one of the things that I think is essential and why the master collector program will also help. One of the things that kind of threw me off, right, is there are bots that get drops. Look, I'm on there trying to snipe lower mints and I'm seeing the same people. I'm like, there's no way you just got 5 comic drops in a row. Oh, and that's weird that like you got a common, multiple uncommon, right? So it happens, and they say that it happens, and that's fine. And that's why they're introducing the queue system, right? Well, you'll go in and you'll just have this queue. But then I saw like kind of in some like these people who are trying to sell me on bots, and they're just like, oh, well, when the new drop system comes out, we'll be able to set it up so you can just have 1,000 accounts and enter in. Well, if you have the master collector program that says, well, number one, you got to have a certain amount of points to even enter into the queue.
Wow.
Or you got to do some other activity. Well, there's no way if I'm managing all these bots that I can do that, right? So it's going to really limit the ability for people to set up just like fake accounts and enter into the drop system. So I think from that point, that will actually really help real people get the drops. But to your point, they do have to make sure that they manage it to a point where the new people coming in. Because look, I don't get drops anymore, man. I
Same.
like rarely, right? And I remember like freaking Marvel One comic, it was just like buy, buy. You can just continue to hit buy until it's sold out. And so we're in a different space. And do I get super bummed when like my brother's like, oh, I got the golden like moment drop, and I'm like, I got nothing. I've got nothing for 2 months. And then I say, okay, now I'm a new person that hasn't gotten anything. And I think that's a big point. So if the master collector program comes in and it actually inhibits these new people from getting drops even more, that could be a big blow to VeVe's growth.
Wow. Man, some brilliant points. Some of the stuff that you said there, I've never even thought about before. One of the most interesting things that you said too is that with these bots, when you have these different points or you have some kind of affiliation with VeVe already, like you're holding different collectibles, you have a different interest, you have a lot of social activity, and potentially 10 minutes before drop, they're like, do these 4 tasks that are very human orientated, and that's the only way that you can even enter. So there's so many ways to combat the bot system when they go that style. So I do think it'd be challenging for some kind of hacker or developer to come up with some kind of AI that is able to manage that if they're changing it routinely. So like I think that's pretty cool what you said there. I didn't think about that. So that's terrific. And then I guess the other thing that's leading off this is the cashout, right? Obviously, it's been in beta testing. There's supposedly a few people that have cashed up big numbers, and I haven't been in talks with anybody that like, I'm sure there's people that have it, but I haven't been in talks with people that do. And I guess some concerns around that I've heard from the community are, why wouldn't they time it where when the cash out's coming, some major release happens or the master collector program comes in and counteracts, that negative dip so that we don't see, the community leave or crash. And so I guess like my question to you is, do you think that one, there will be a dip, which I think is obvious, but 2, do you think that's going to be a pretty quick correction, or do you think maybe people are going to take their money and run?
So great points and questions. I definitely think that there will be a dip. We've already started to see a dip, and I think that there's a lot of variables that are going into why we're seeing this dip, but one of them is the anticipation of the MTL and the ability to cash out, right? And people are like, hey, I want to take some profits. I got bills to pay. I need a car. I've been here for forever, and my value's been trapped in here. And so like, I definitely want to sell some stuff. And then there's other people who are like, man, I got in and like, I thought the MTL was coming in August, and then it like in November and December, and it's still not here, and I'm out. Like, I'm done with it. Like, I'm done with the stress. So I do think that there will be more people that cash out, and it doesn't really take a lot of people to list items for the floor to drop pretty quickly on something, So I do think that there will be a dip. That being said, I've talked to a ton of people who, when I tell them about what VeVe's all about, they're stoked. And then I'm like, but before you put in any money, just know that you can't pull out any money yet. And they're like, what? They're like, I'm out, but let me know when I can. Right. So there are a lot of people and whales sitting on the sidelines saying, hey, once I know that I can get my money out, because like, I want to flip stuff and like, I need liquidity, and that's important to me. And so once that's there, I do think that there would be an influx. That being said, so it's funny that you bring that up, because that was one of the like thoughts that I had, is you do a major release of something to counteract that dip, and that will help, because we saw what happened with MDA Top Shots when the cash out finally came and prices just plummeted, and I'm talking like 90% retracements on certain things, right? And people were just like, just take it away, and they kind of just did it all at once too, right? And so my thoughts, like, look, VeVe's not perfect. Like, I think that they try super hard. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of like how slow the rollout has been. I'm very familiar with money transmitter licenses and the regulations and laws surrounding that. And it's a lot. There's a lot of red tape and things. I feel like they could have been more transparent and still could be more transparent. And maybe this video that's coming out next week, they'll give us some more updates on stuff, right? But I was shocked with Akil Patterson's interview with Reese when he said that there was only 60 people beta testing the MTL. And I was like, well, you guys said that you were doing beta testing for people, but like end of December into January. And I'm like, you're only at 60 people, like 2.5 months in, like that's not enough. Like that's not enough. And so anyways, I'm hoping that as they might be doing a slower rollout so that there isn't just this open the floodgates and then everything people are selling. So like it actually is protecting investors that way to do it. And that all of a sudden there's not everyone trying to cash out all at once. And so everyone's trying to sell their stuff and things just plummet. But if you do it gradually, right, over time, then people are kind of selling and there is this slower dip, but then there are people that start to come in. So there is a danger in the way that they roll that out. I do think that there will be a dip. But with the way the crypto space is in general, people are kind of nervous to do investment. So at first I was like, oh, there's going to be this huge inflow of cash as soon as that opens up. I don't know if it's going to be as big of an inflow. So there might be kind of like a lull once that happens. So I'd love to hear like what you think is going to happen.
Man, I think we have a very similar mindset on all this stuff. So it's great. It's almost like I feel like I'm talking to myself. Like actually you have better points than I do. So I mean, I feel like I'm talking to Chad 2.0, but yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. I think one of the biggest things over Top Shots, in my opinion, is that VeVe has, way more major licenses and some of, in my opinion, things that would matter more on the blockchain. Like, don't be wrong. Like, I think like LeBron James, Steph Curry, those kind of things, those moments probably pretty iconic, but some stuff that's like, kind of a lower level player throwing an assist, I'm like, I just don't think that really matters in the grand scheme of things. It's like when I think Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, like all these different things, I'm like, okay, that stuff, in my opinion, the first ever on the blockchain, is more attractive to me. I'm not saying to the entirety of NBA Top Shots. I just meant there's only a few pieces in there that I would want to hold in my wallet. So I think that's one piece. But another piece is that VeVe over every other NFT platform has made the ease of use for blockchain like incredibly easy, right? Like you just buy now with your phone. I mean, anybody could do it. I mean, you could be 94 years old and figure it out. And I think that's, one part that people forget is that with, most NFTs on OpenSea, I mean, you've got to set up a MetaMask, you've got to transfer ETH through a crypto and then go to like, if you're not used to sending a transaction, sometimes it just disappears for an hour. And the first time I did it in 2017, I thought I lost 10 grand. I was like, oh my God, I was crying. Like, you know what I mean? Like, like that's the kind of thing. Right. And so I think there's a few upsides, but I agree with you. I think there's definitely going to be a dip. Money talks. I mean, even for me, 20 grand can do a lot, right? I mean, you can go buy new equipment, you can like pay off some bills, you can, like pay some debts. Like there's so much stuff that you can do with that type of money. So I think it's going to be attractive to people, especially because I think in the black market, it's like a 0.55 gem rate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And now on VeVe, it's like it'd probably be a 0.9. So it's funny how people are complaining about that, because I'm like, well, I mean, this is probably the best I've seen. If I was getting 0.9 gems back in August, holy, I would have been a happy guy. Right. So I think there's some positives there. And then I guess, my last question for you, which I think is important, is COVID. And I felt like really garnered a lot of interest into the digital space, into collecting in general. Like Pokemon, for instance, in 2020 skyrocketed, not just because of Logan Paul, but because people were bored. They're at home, they weren't outside anymore. And now we're kind of seeing COVID, get taken away, so to speak, even though it's still present. But people are focusing on other things and they're back to physical activities and, wanting to do things outside with people. So, is it possible that NFTs were just like a bubble for 2 years? Or do you think like the NFT space is just taking a big breath and then, oh boy, this is our future. And metaverses in the digital realm and Instagram having NFT profile pictures and all that jazz will then just take over. So do you think, potentially there's a lot of hunger for for not enough NFTs and that should fizzle out over time? Or do you think we're still very bullish in this space?
I think you bring up some good points that COVID accelerated the NFT breakout, right? In the digital space in general. For me, like, I mean, I feel like I was one of those people, right? Like I'm just sitting at home. I'm not really doing like what's on the internet. What can I find? And doing this research and finding these NFTs. And then, yeah, like I do also find as like restrictions are kind of opening up that like I am outside more. I'm not on my phone as much. But there's something that look, there are cycles and like it's been interesting as I've talked to people who are down on the VV market. They're like, my collectibles are down. OMI just dropped significantly. And I just said, look, like there are cycles with everything, right? I mean, Bored Ape Yacht Clubs go through cycles. Like those things will drop in value, and then something announcement will come up and shoot it back up. And like literally every crypto project and every market has cycles, and they go up and down. And so I do think that there's been this hyper focus on NFTs, and I do believe that there's a lot of market saturation, especially though with like the profile pick,
Right.
NFTs. And where I see the future going is that the NFTs that will survive are ones that actually add utility. Now, I think that there will be the historic ones like CryptoPunks, even Bored Ape Yacht Club, but Bored Ape Yacht Club just continues to add utility to that makes it more valuable. But and we're seeing that, right? They have the Ape coin now that they're coming out with, and everything that's attached to that. And so like I kind of look to them as like this gold standard of like they continue to innovate and what are they thinking, and I'm thinking a lot of the same things, that basically it's the utility that's coming. That's why I'm extremely bullish on OMI and the OMI utility program, what we'll be able to do with the token, not just within VeVe. We're going to be able to buy stuff on Immutable X and potentially other platforms and things. And then the NFTs themselves with the VeVeverse and the potential interoperability. So there is a lull. There's a lot of things going on in the world, and so my bet is this: is I think that we have a great team behind VeVe. I think that they do have. I think they're visionaries. I do believe that David Yu and Dan Crowther are visionaries. They were talking about VVs before, I mean NFTs before anyone else, right? And they're looking beyond that now, and they're not telling us, but they've got plans and they have this roadmap. And so my bet is on that. I do think that NFTs, a lot of them are going to go to zero, a lot of them, and in fact, many of mine have from OpenSea and a lot of projects. That the project I bet on, instead of picking Bored Apes, Apimon eggs, which Crypto Ocasio Cortez was there too. Like, I mean, like I bought those freaking things, and they had this awesome roadmap that seemed cool, and basically smart contract like deficiencies in the coding, like it went to zero, right? And so, but so a lot of them will go to zero, and so as I talk to the community and they're panicking and stuff, I say, well, I'm invested in so many projects across the crypto sphere, really. And one of the most biggest projects that I'm bullish on is VeVe for that specific reason. I think that there's this utility that's going to continue, but there's going to be a dip, and that's okay. And these are the people who make it wealthy, are the ones who they do their research and they buy the dip on the projects that they believe are going to be successful. Some of those don't pan out, but the ones that do end up being pretty big deal.
Right. Wow. I don't even know if there's anything I can add to that. I think that was, again, really well said. And listen, man, complete honor, like having you on. These are one of the conversations that, even though I had pointed questions for you, I've kind of forgot that I was an interview, and I was more listening and just taking it all in. So, so it's really appreciated. I do this a lot. Like I like to get the community's perspective, and especially like people as smart as yourself. So, if you ever want to come back on, happy to have you. We always do like these VV and chill talks with some of the guys and girls, whoever's interested in joining for that. So, all I can say is, thanks so much. And I think this is a really good interview. I think we covered a lot of important topics, and I thought we got pretty detailed on some of these issues. So.
Yeah, like Chad, honestly, it is an honor. Like, I mean, you, like I said, you were one of the first people, one of the first channels that like I started to follow as I got into VV. I will absolutely take you up on those VV and chill spaces anytime, man. Like you add so much, number one, to the community. It's funny, like I know that you're kind of shy when you get on those Twitter spaces and stuff, but people are dying to hear from you. You have like very intelligent and have incredible insight into things, and people can benefit from that. So like, again, it's been my honor to be on your channel. Love chatting with you, and definitely like continue just to get you to know you better, man, and just succeed through VeVe going forward together, man.
I totally agree, bro. And I feel like that's the part to me that's so fun. And this is like, you know, I'm meeting people like yourself that I'm like now closer to than some of my friends. You know what I mean? It's just like, this is the way that this is happening. And it's because I also think VeVe draws a certain type of person. It's like an analytical, you know, like obviously they love like the fandom, they love collecting, they love all this stuff, they love crypto, decentralization. So I feel like a lot of these people that are coming to the space, I'm like, oh damn, we get along, we get along. So it's like my poor friends are like, dude, what are we doing? They're like, we're not going kayak anymore. I'm like, fuck that. You know? Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah. 100%, man. Yeah, you're definitely like-minded people, get along. And yeah, I like you said, I feel like I'm talking to like a mirrored version of myself, just smarter, who's been in collecting a lot longer than me. So
you're the man, bro. Well, yo, thanks so much for coming on. Let's do this again soon. I know the community is gonna love this one, and yeah, really appreciate you, you know, spending your time here with us tonight.
thanks so much.
Take care, brother.
Peace.